Finding a strange pill in my husband's pocket, I secretly replaced it with a veterinary drug. In the middle of the night, my sister-in-law's scream echoed through the house. My husband roared like a wild beast, and my mother-in-law, witnessing the scene, collapsed in a dead faint. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my channel. How would you react if you discovered that your husband, who once swore eternal love, was hiding a devil's potion in his pocket, while his back hadn't belonged to you for months? And would you have the courage to bet your entire life on a single insane gambit to turn that sinful pill into a weapon of destruction, so that in the dead of night, a blood-curdling scream and the roar of a wild animal would rip off all the masks, exposing a truth more hideous than hell itself? Tonight, I placed my bet, and I don't know if victory or total oblivion awaits me. My name is Veronica. I'm 30 years old, and for 6 years, I've been married into the Hamilton family. 6 years is a long time, long enough to turn a naive girl who believed in fairy tale love into a silent woman, a shadow in her own home. On the outside, everyone said I was lucky. Lucky to have married David, a successful sales director with a polished appearance and a silver tongue. Lucky to live in a sprawling 3-story house in a wealthy suburb, never having to worry about money. But they didn't know the price of that luck. Humiliation and profound loneliness. My new family, besides my treacherous husband and my sharp-tongued mother-in-law, Patricia, also included my husband's younger brother, Michael, and his family. Michael was a kind, honest man, but his job as a civil engineer required constant travel and frequent night shifts. His absence created a deadly void, a golden opportunity for his wife, Megan, and his older brother, David, to sow their sin. Megan, my sister-in-law, was a beautiful woman, but her beauty was inseparable from her promiscuity and arrogance. She always looked down on me, the small-town girl, and used her looks to shamelessly flirt with and seduce my own husband. But the most guilty party, of course, was David. For the last 6 months, he had completely changed. From a loving and attentive husband, he had turned into a cold and irritable tyrant. Our marital life had ceased to exist. He moved into his home office at the end of the hall, claiming he needed quiet to work on a major project. I believed him. I gritted my teeth and endured it, convincing myself he was doing it for his career. I still brought him his meals and drinks, caring for him like a queen for her king. While I withered in solitude, Megan blossomed with each passing day. She ruthlessly spent money on expensive designer clothes and accessories that Michael's salary could never cover. Her excessive closeness with my husband became more and more obvious. A casual touch, a meaningful glance, whispers in. The night when Michael was away, each was like a needle piercing my heart, making it bleed. Suspicion grew into a monster that devoured my soul, turning me into a paranoid insomniac. And this afternoon, that monster was fed its fill of the raw truth. David returned from a client meeting, quickly showered, and locked himself in his office again, tossing his suit jacket on the back of a chair. Out of habit, I picked it up to take it to the dry cleaners. I slipped my hand into the inner pocket, and my heart stopped. I pulled out a blister pack of pills, a black foil pack with just one name on it, in English, Vigormax 3000. There was a single, bright blue capsule left in the pack. I'm not a child. I knew it was a powerful male enhancement drug. One agonizing and humiliating question drilled into my brain. Why? Why would my husband need this when he hadn't touched me in 6 months? Who did he buy it for? The answer was as clear as day, bitter and cruel. Megan. Michael was on another night shift. Tonight, my husband had also found an excuse to work late. This pill was his preparation for a night of sinful pleasure with his own brother's wife. They were going to turn this house, where I and his mother slept, into their own private brothel. A wave of rage and disgust washed over me. I wanted to storm in there, throw the bright blister pack in their faces, and destroy this sham of a family. But a cold, rational thought stopped me. If I did that, they would deny everything. My mother-in-law would leap to the defense of her precious son and her darling daughter-in-law, and I would be the one blamed. I couldn't suffer such a crushing defeat. The 6 best years of my youth couldn't end in such disgrace. I clenched the blister pack in my hand. A mad, cruel plan ignited in my mind. I wouldn't expose them. I would turn their own weapon into the instrument of their own weapon. Destruction. I remembered a veterinary drug in our medicine cabinet, a dewormer, for livestock that my father had given me last week for our dog at the lake house. He had warned me it was extremely potent and that an incorrect dose could cause convulsions, foaming at the mouth, and severe nervous system disruption. Dance with death. I locked myself in my room. My hands trembled as I used a razor blade to carefully open the King Power capsule. I wrapped the blue powder in a piece of paper and hid it. Then, I did the same with the veterinary tablet, took its beige powder, and filled the blue capsule with it. I perfectly sealed the two halves back together. I had created a monster, a pill that looked like a ticket to paradise but was filled with the contents of hell. I placed the doctored capsule back in the blister pack and returned it to the pocket of David's jacket, as if nothing had happened. When I was done, I collapsed onto the bed, drenched in a cold sweat. I was terrified, but deep down, I felt a wild, vengeful satisfaction. Night fell. Dinner was a tense, silent affair. After Michael hurriedly left for work, David also retreated to his office, not forgetting to tell me to go to bed. I lay on the cold sheets, my eyes wide open. I was waiting for the signal that my high-stakes game had begun. At exactly midnight, I heard the soft click of David's office door opening, followed by someone tiptoeing down the hall towards Megan's room. Her door creaked open, then shut. My heart stopped. It had begun. Time stretched on, slow and agonizing. Suddenly, a wild, inhuman scream pierced the night silence. It came from Megan's room. Before I could process it, another sound erupted, a roar, the roar of a wounded beast, from the same place. Rah! It was David's voice, my husband's. Megan's scream and David's roar, like 2 sledgehammer blows, shattered the dead silence of the house. I shot out of bed, my heart pounding in my chest. My gambit had worked, but the result was far more horrifying than I could have imagined. My mother-in-law's door flew open. Patricia ran into the hallway, her aged face pale with terror, her gray hair sticking out in all directions. What happened? What's going on? Burglars! She stammered, her eyes darting around in fear. I didn't answer, just pointed a trembling hand towards the sinful room, from which inhuman sounds were now pouring. Megan's scream had devolved into choked sobs mixed with animalistic terror. Help me! Help! Monster, get away from me! David's roar grew louder, more insane. It was joined by dull thuds, as if a body was being slammed against the wall. Patricia and I exchanged a look. In both our eyes was a nameless dread. David! Megan! What's wrong with you? She called out, in a trembling voice. Stumbling, she approached the door and yanked on the handle, but it was locked from the inside. Mom, help me, save me, came Megan's faint, desperate cry. Break it down! We have to break down the door now, Patricia shrieked, her voice cracking. She turned to me, her eyes wild with command. Veronica, what? Are you standing there for? Go find an axe. Quickly. Like an automaton, I ran to the utility closet and found a heavy sledgehammer. When I returned, Patricia was throwing her shoulder against the thick wooden door, but what could an elderly woman do? I handed her the hammer. She snatched it, her eyes bloodshot, and began smashing it against the lock with fury. Clang! Clang! The sound of metal on metal was deafening, but even it couldn't drown out the gruesome sounds from within. After a dozen blows, the lock finally gave way. The door swung open, and a wave of hot, suffocating air with a nauseating smell washed over us. And then we saw it, a scene that neither I nor Patricia would likely ever forget. This wasn't just a scene of them cheating. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, a living, breathing hellscape right in front of me. The room was in complete disarray, as if a hurricane had torn through it. The Polenta Sabine 2HD comforter and pillows were on the floor. A bedside lamp was shattered, sharp, shards of glass scattered everywhere. And in the middle of the room lay David, my elegant and respectable husband, completely naked. But that wasn't the worst of it. His entire body was crimson red, like a boiled lobster. His skin was covered in bloody scratches, which he had apparently inflicted upon himself. White foam trickled from his mouth, and his eyes rolled wildly in their sockets, devoid of any human reason. He was convulsing on the floor, his hands continuing to claw at his own body, a bestial growl tearing from his throat. This was no longer David. It was a wild animal in agony. Cowering in a corner behind the vanity table was Megan. She, too, was half naked. Her long hair was a tangled mess, her beautiful face contorted with terror. She was curled into a ball, her arms wrapped around her trembling body, staring with a crazed look at the monster writhing on the floor. Seeing the door open, she began to crawl towards us like a drowning person grasping for a lifeline, her sobs now silent. "Mom, Veronica, help me. He's gone insane." Patricia froze in the doorway. Her face went from pale to a deathly white, then a sickly blue. Her lips trembled. She tried to speak, but no words came out. She stared at her beloved son, now a beast, and then at her younger daughter-in-law, in her humiliating, shameful state. Those two images, too naked and disgusting, truths, delivered a blow too powerful for a mind that had always prided itself on family values and reputation. Her mouth fell open, her eyes bulged, and with a soft groan, she went limp and collapsed to the floor, unconscious. "Mom!" I screamed, instinctively rushing towards her, but it was too late. She had passed out right on the threshold of that sinful room. Everything had happened too fast, too horribly. The screams, the crashing, and the crying had woken up the entire cul-de-sac. I could hear whispers, the sound of footsteps at our gate. A few curious neighbors had already run over. They stood at the entrance, staring in bewilderment at the Rulerbentatible, chaos inside. I knew that my family's performance, the glittering facade Patricia had so carefully constructed over the years, had just been shattered into a million pieces. I was panicking, but within that panic lived an icy resolve. What now? I can't let it end here. My game has just begun. I have to control this. I have to play the part of the wife and daughter-in-law in absolute shock. With a trembling hand, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. My voice cracked as I sobbed into the receiver. 911. What's your emergency? There's a terrible accident at my house. Please come quickly. The address is... I dictated the address, hiccuping through my tears. My hands and feet were shaking. My performance was just beginning. And the curtain that had hidden this family's Brighton rot was about to be torn down tonight by my own hand. The wail of ambulance sirens pierced the night, ripping through the silence of our cul-de-sac. Red and blue flashing lights illuminated the curious faces of our neighbors, the crowd in front of our gate growing larger by the minute. The gate wasn't locked. It had been pushed open by the same helpful neighbors who had rushed over first. They stood there, whispering and pointing. Every glance, every whisper, was like 1,000 needles stabbing into what was once called the Hamilton family's honor. Paramedics, their faces professional but unable to hide their surprise, quickly wheeled a gurney inside. I, playing the part of the distraught wife, bustled around them with tear-streaked eyes and a cracking voice, pointing the way. This way, my husband, my mother-in-law, please save them. I was playing my role so convincingly I surprised myself. I grabbed a female paramedic's arm and whispered tremulously, "Ma'am, my husband? I don't know why, but he just went berserk. He was smashing everything, scratching himself. And my mother-in-law, she collapsed from the shock." The paramedic patted my hand gently. "Calm down, ma'am. We'll do everything we can." The scene in Megan's bedroom now presented itself to even more people. The paramedics, too, were stunned for a few seconds, but they quickly snapped into action and split up. 2 of them attended to David. He was convulsing less by now, but still growling. His eyes were vacant, his body still naked. They had to inject him with a powerful sedative and, with great difficulty, get him onto the gurney, hastily covering him with a thin blanket. 2 other paramedics were helping Patricia, checking her blood pressure and pulse, then quickly placing her on another gurney. Megan was still huddled in the corner, crying silently. One of the female paramedics went over, draped my housecoat over her shoulders, and helped her up. "Are you injured anywhere? You need to be checked out," she asked gently. Megan just shook her head, her face a mask of exhaustion and indifference. She didn't dare look up. Her usual audacity and flirtatiousness had vanished, leaving only humiliation and shame. And then the parade of shame began. First, they carried out the gurney with David. Under the glow of the streetlights and the camera flashes from neighbors' Lana phones, the image of the respectable sales director, David Hamilton, was presented in its most pathetic form. The thin blanket did little to hide his scratched body. Foam still clung to his lips, and his gaze was wild even after the sedative. The whispers from the crowd grew louder. "My God, is that David Hamilton? What happened to him? They say he lost his mind. Looks like a bad drug trip. And why was he in his sister-in-law's room? In the middle of the night?" Next, they brought out Patricia, the retired school principal, who had always lectured others on morality and family values, now lay motionless. Her aged face was a deathly pale. Her collapse at the scene of the crime made the story even more salacious and dramatic in the eyes of the witnesses. Last, escorted by a paramedic, came Megan. She was wearing my oversized housecoat, her head bowed low, her hair covering her tear-stained face. But everyone recognized her. The beautiful, stylish sister-in-law now looked like a criminal being led to the gallows. The crowd had more fuel for their gossip. "That's Megan, Michael's wife. Why was she in a room with his brother? Dressed like that? Michael's always on those night shifts. Poor guy. It has to be an affair. They must have had a fight that got out of control." Rumors and speculation began to spread like wildfire. I stood there, watching as the 3 dearest members of my family were loaded, one by one, into the ambulance under the glares and whispers of the entire street. I was crying. Tears of bitter satisfaction streamed down my cheeks. My first trap had been sprung. Their honor, their reputation, the things they valued more than life itself had now been torn away and trampled by my own hand. But this was just the prelude. The main act was yet to come, at the hospital, where science itself would establish the truth. I turned to one of our closer neighbors. "Aunt Val, could you please keep an eye on the house? I have to go with them." Then I climbed into the ambulance and sat in the darkest corner, where no one would notice me. The vehicle, its sirens, blaring, sped away, leaving behind the curious stares and a scandalous story that would be the talk of the town for a very long time. I wiped my tears, but the corners of my lips twitched into a cold smirk. Everything was going exactly according to my plan. The second trap, the trap of medical truth and pathetic excuses, was about to be cast, and I would be the most patient fisherman, waiting for my prey to swim right into it. The atmosphere in the hospital's emergency room was suffocating and tense. The sharp smell of antiseptic stung my nose, mingling with the beeping of machines and the hurried footsteps of doctors. David was placed in a separate room for special observation. Patricia was moved to the ICU, and Megan, after a brief examination, confirmed she had no serious injuries, sat huddled on a bench in the hallway, her face still a mask of shock. As the only lucid relative, I ran around filling out paperwork and making down payments, deliberately displaying my anxiety and distress to everyone. A few nurses looked at me with pity. They had probably already heard a version of the story from the ambulance crew. I just kept my head down, perfectly playing the part of the unfortunate wife on whom tragedy had suddenly fallen. After nearly 2 hours of agonizing waiting, an older doctor, likely the head of the department, came out of the ER. He called me over, his face serious. "Are you the next of kin for the patient, David Hamilton?" Yes, I'm his wife. "What's wrong with my husband, doctor?" I asked quickly, my voice laced with concern. The doctor adjusted his glasses and gave me a long, studying look. "The patient's condition has temporarily stabilized after a sedative and having his stomach pumped. However, the lab results showed something very unusual." He paused, as if to prepare me. "In his blood and stomach contents, we found traces of fenbendazole. It's the active ingredient in livestock deworming medication. It is absolutely not intended for human consumption. Ingesting this substance in a large dose caused severe poisoning, leading to intense hallucinations, central nervous system agitation, and acute digestive distress. You're lucky he was brought in when he was. Otherwise, the consequences could have been irreversible. Every word from the doctor was like a verdict, clear and irrefutable. It was exactly what I had been waiting for, a medical conclusion that could not be disputed. I feigned shock, covering my mouth with my hands, my eyes filling with tears. Veterinary medicine? Oh my God, how is that possible? We don't have anything like that in the house. Doctor, there must be some mistake. I broke down into sobs, perfectly playing the role of a wife in disbelief. The doctor sighed and gently patted my shoulder. We can only report what the tests show. You may want to contact the police to have them investigate. For now, the patient will need to be under observation for a few more days. You should go check on your mother-in-law. She just regained consciousness. I thanked the doctor and, feigning a stumble, made my way towards the ICU. This information would surely reach Patricia quickly, and I wanted to see how the woman, who had always put reputation above all else, would spin this. As I expected, Patricia was awake when I entered. She lay on the hospital bed, still pale, but her eyes had regained their familiar cold glint. Megan was sitting beside her, tearfully relaying the doctor's diagnosis. Upon hearing it, Patricia showed no surprise or panic. Instead, her gaze locked onto me, as if trying to burn a hole through me. "You did this, didn't you?" she hissed, her breath still weak. I flinched and took a step back, my face a mask of hurt. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I don't understand. I just came from the doctor myself. I'm scared to death." "Don't pretend," Patricia spat. "Besides you, who else in this house would want to poison David with that filth?" Just then, Megan chimed in, her tone tearful but calculated. "Mom, you know, I was thinking, maybe David was sleepwalking? Maybe he wandered into my room by mistake, and in his sleep, he drank something he shouldn't have." I almost laughed out loud. The scenario was laughably absurd, but in this situation, it was the only life raft they could grab. Patricia seemed to snap to attention, her eyes lighting up. "That's it. Sleepwalking. My David sometimes has sleepwalking episodes. He must have been wandering in his sleep and drank something terrible. Maybe the rat poison I bought the other day and put in the corner of the kitchen." "What's this about veterinary medicine?" She said it with such conviction, as if it were the gospel truth. She was trying to steer the linusly of line and R2ANTN and R2A2A Sheehan and narrative into a different, less shameful direction. Sleepwalking and accidental. Rat poisoning still sounded better than an affair with a sister-in-law and a botched dose of an aphrodisiac. Megan immediately picked up the cue. "Yes, Mom. I was asleep, and suddenly I felt someone come into the room. I thought it was Michael back early from work, and then David just collapsed on me. I was so scared," I screamed. She wept, pitifully, trying to craft an image of an innocent victim attacked by her sleepwalking brother-in-law. David had just been moved from the ER to a regular room. He was conscious, but still very weak. Hearing the performance his mother and sister-in-law were staging, he, however foolish, understood what was required of him. I don't remember anything," he mumbled. "My head is splitting. It must have been sleepwalking." The Trinity mother and her two cheating children had united to create the Brahmanis Lateritiam. Perfect performance, a pathetic excuse to cover their sin. They looked at me, with a gaze that was both a plea and a threat, demanding that I accept this absurd story. They thought I was the same stupid, easily manipulated Veronica. They were wrong. I looked at them, tears still streaming down my face, but my soul felt nothing but boundless contempt. Sleepwalking? But the doctor said it was a medicine for dogs and cats. "We don't have any pets at home," I asked. A seemingly innocent question that nonetheless punched a hole right through their script. Patricia faltered, her expression changing, but she was an old fox. Who knows? Maybe a rat brought it in from a neighbor's yard. "Anyway, we can't let this get Out. We'll tell the doctors he's a sleepwalker, that he drank something by mistake, and we'll ask for him to be discharged. If this gets to the police, imagine the shame. She finished in a commanding tone, allowing no room for argument. I remained silent, my head bowed, pretending to agree. But inside me, a storm was raging. Fine. If you want to play, I'll watch your show, but this play won't have the simple ending you're hoping for. Because the most important audience member, the one who has the right to judge, is about to arrive, and I'm very curious to see how you perform when faced with the wrath of a man who was cuckolded by his own brother and wife. The storm I was waiting for broke sooner than I expected. Michael, having received a frantic call from me about the whole family being hospitalized, had immediately rushed from his construction site out of town. He burst into the Prosit hospital like a hurricane, his kind, simple face contorted with anxiety and fear. "Veronica, what happened? Is everyone okay?" he cried, grabbing my shoulders. With my eyes swollen from crying, I just shook my head, my voice choked. "Michael, you should go into the room first. Mom, David, and Megan, they're all in there." My unfinished sentence was like a slow-acting poison, seeping into Michael's mind. He asked no more questions and shoved the door open, storming into the room. When Michael entered, he walked right into a scene of a loving family after a terrible accident. Patricia was sitting up in bed while Megan spoon-fed her some broth. David lay on the adjacent bed, looking exhausted. The sight of Michael made all three of them jump. A flicker of guilt crossed their faces. "Michael, why are you here at this hour?" Patricia stammered. "Mom, David, Megan, what happened to you?" Veronica said there was an accident. "What happened?" Michael's eyes scanned the three of them, finally landing on Prue-placed Megan, who was still wearing my housecoat. A dark suspicion began to dawn in his eyes. Patricia quickly launched into their rehearsed story. "It's nothing terrible, son, just a little incident. Last night, David had a sleepwalking episode. He was wandering around the house and accidentally drank some rat poison. Megan saw it and got scared and screamed, and the shock of it all made me pass out. Thank God they got us to the hospital in time. We're all fine now." She told the story, smoothly, trying to appear calm. Michael frowned. "Sleepwalking? Drank rat poison? I've never heard of David having that problem." He looked at his brother, who lowered his head, not daring to meet his gaze. "Is that true, David?" David gave a barely perceptible nod, his voice almost a whisper. I don't really remember. I guess so." David's hesitation only fueled Michael's suspicion. He turned to his wife. "Megan, you tell me, what really happened last night?" Megan started to tremble, her eyes filling with tears again. She repeated, word for word, what Patricia had told her to say. "I was sleeping, and suddenly I saw David in the room. He was walking around the bed, and then he just fell and started convulsing. I was so scared I screamed. That's all I know." Their story, though rehearsed, had too many holes. Michael was an engineer. His mind was logical and clear. He wasn't so easily fooled by such a ridiculous tale. "Wait a minute," he interrupted her. "If David drank poison and started having convulsions, why were you both naked?" Michael's question was like a knife to the heart of all three. The air in the Planis Lake room went still. Patricia, David, and Megan all turned pale. No one could utter a word. At that moment, I entered the room. I knew it was time for my first strike. I walked over to Michael, gently patted his shoulder, and said in a sympathetic voice, "Michael, calm down. They've all just been through so much stress. Maybe they're confused about the details. It's in the past now. Don't interrogate them like this, or Mom might get sick again." My words sounded like an attempt to placate, but they were actually a subtle confirmation that their story was a lie. Then I turned to Megan and handed her a bag of clothes. "Megan, I went home and brought you some of your things. You should change. You'll be more comfortable. My housecoat is probably a little big on you." This sentence was another needle, pricking at Michael's raw nerves. Why was his wife wearing his sister-in-law's clothes? What state had they been in last night? Seeing Michael still standing there, lost in thought, I decided to add more fuel to the fire. I looked at David and asked in an innocent voice, "David, are you Feeling better? It's so strange, though. The doctor said you were poisoned by medicine for dogs and cats, but Mom says it was rat poison. I'm so confused. Well, I guess the lab must have made a mistake. You just rest and get well. I emphasized the words medicine for dogs and cats. They drilled into Michael's ears. The absurdity of the situation had reached its peak. Where did a disiac veterinary drug come from? And why did his brother take it in his wife's room in the middle of the night? Michael could no longer contain himself. He spun around, grabbed Megan by the shoulders and roared. Tell me the truth. Were you two doing something behind my back? Why was he in your room? Why were you both naked? Tell me. Megan shrieked in terror. No, nothing happened. Don't accuse me. Patricia, seeing the situation spiral out of control, screamed, Michael, have you lost your mind? How dare you suspect your own brother? I told you, it was an accident. You don't believe me. You don't believe your brother. You don't believe your wife? She tried to use her maternal authority to quell him, but he was no longer the obedient son. Suspicion and jealousy had transformed him. Mom, stop protecting them. Something is not right here, and I will get to the bottom of it. I stood in the corner, silently watching the family drama reach its climax. A cold smile reappeared on my lips. It was going even better than I had expected. I didn't have to do much. A few hints, a few gentle prods, and the fire of suspicion in Michael's soul had erupted into a furious blaze. And I knew that this fire could not be extinguished. It would smolder until it had burned all the lies of this family to the ground. And now it was time for me to return to the scene of the crime, to retrieve the final piece of evidence, the one that would put an end to this whole story. While Michael was raging at the hospital, I used the excuse of needing to make some soup and bring fresh clothes for everyone to drive home. It was the perfect opportunity to retrieve my ultimate prize, the weapon that would decide the outcome of this war. The house was eerily quiet. There were no imperious commands from my mother-in-law, no flirtatious smirks from my sister-in-law, no presence of my treacherous husband. I walked through my own home feeling like a burglar, but this time, I was breaking in to reclaim my justice. I went upstairs, but not to my bedroom or David's office. My destination was the living room. There stood the expensive leather sofa that my mother-in-law was so proud of. It was where she usually sat like a queen, judging and lecturing me. But she never knew that in this very formal and open space, the filthiest and most disgusting things were happening. About a month ago, when David's coldness and Megan's flirtations became unbearable, my extreme anxiety forced me to act. I couldn't live in uncertainty and suspicion any longer. I needed proof. After many sleepless nights, I made a bold decision. I ordered a tiny spy camera online, disguised as a coat hook. I told everyone I bought it for the bathroom, but I secretly installed it in the most unexpected place, on the top edge of the wooden wine cabinet, directly opposite the sofa. The camera's view covered the entire living room. I checked the recordings for weeks, but only saw mundane family life. For a prettier moment, I even thought I was going crazy with paranoia, but a woman's intuition wouldn't let me give up. And today, I knew my intuition had been right. I pushed a chair over, climbed up, and carefully removed the camera. My heart was pounding like a drum. I was terrified to face the truth, but I craved it. I took the camera to my bedroom and locked the door. I plugged it into my laptop. Dozens of video files, sorted by date, appeared on the screen. I skipped the last few days. I knew they wouldn't have done anything in the living room. Recently, I scrolled back 2 weeks, to a particular Saturday. I remembered that day, my mother-in-law and I had gone to the lake house for the day, and Michael was on an urgent business trip in another city. Only David and Megan were home. David had claimed he had a lot of work, and Megan had complained of being tired. Now I understood how perfect that coincidence had been. With a trembling hand, I pressed play. The screen lit up. First, an empty living room. About 10 minutes later, Megan appeared. She was wearing a short, bright red silk robe, so sheer it was almost transparent. She got a bottle of water from the mini fridge, sat on the sofa, and struck the most seductive pose imaginable. A few minutes later, David emerged from his office. Seeing Megan, his eyes darkened with lust. He said, "Nothing, just walked over and sat beside her. And then, right before my eyes, unfolded the scene I had only dared to imagine in my worst nightmares. But now I was seeing it in excruciating detail. They fell upon each other like moths to a flame. They kissed, they caressed each other. The moans and vulgar words I never thought I'd hear from my sophisticated husband filled the room. They had no shame, no guilt. They made love right there, on the sofa where the entire family sat every day, in the very space my mother-in-law proudly called a bastion of family values. Tears streamed down my face, not of pain, but of pure rage. I looked at the man in the video. Was that David, the husband I had loved for 6 years? No, it was a devil in human form. I looked at the woman in the video. Was that Megan, the sister-in-law I had tried to tolerate? No, she was a shameless, lustful viper. Gritting my teeth, I watched the entire hour-long video to the end. I didn't miss a single detail. I wanted to burn this betrayal into my memory forever. Then, I calmly copied the video to a flash drive and made a second backup to my cloud storage. When I was finished, I erased all data from the camera and put it back in its place. No traces. The ironclad proof was now in my hands. The moment I released it, the lives of those two scumbags would turn to dust. David's reputation, Megan's fake innocence, and Patricia's so-called family values, all of it would go up in flames. But I wasn't going to do it right now. A video of an affair wasn't enough. It only proved their immorality. I wanted more. I wanted them to pay not just with their reputation, but financially. I wanted them to be left with nothing, to live in misery and poverty. I wanted to expose not only their betrayal, but also the greed and selfishness that ran deep in this family's blood. And for that, I needed one more piece of evidence. Evidence related to money. And I knew where to find it. Hatred had turned me into a completely different person, cold, calculating, and ruthless. The naive lamb, Veronica, was dead. Now, only a she-wolf remained, ready to tear her prey to pieces. After hiding the flash drive with its devastating truth, I didn't hurry back to the hospital. I knew the drama there was still unfolding, and my absence would only add to their anxiety. They would wonder what I was plotting. I needed time, precious time, to execute the next step of my revenge. My target now was David's office, a place I had never been allowed to enter, without permission. But today, no one could stop me. The office was furnished, simply but tastefully. A large mahogany desk, an expensive leather chair, a bookshelf filled with books on economics and management. It all projected an obliterated image of an intellectual and successful man. But to me, it was now just a false shell hiding a rotten and depraved soul. I sat in his chair and opened the laptop he always used. Luckily, he had a habit of not using a password. I quickly checked his browser history. Nothing. Unusual financial news, stock market reports. He was smart enough to cover his tracks, but he didn't know that wasn't what I was looking for. I opened a personal finance program where I knew he kept all his banking information. David and I had a joint savings account in both our names. It was money I had saved for 6 years from my salary as an accountant, combined with a portion of the money David contributed. I had planned to use that money for our future children. It was my sweat, my tears, my future. I logged into our online banking. When the balance appeared on the screen, the heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. Less than $1,000 remained in the account. Nearly $500,000, all our savings had vanished. I felt dizzy. I gripped the edge of the desk to keep from falling. With a trembling hand, I clicked on the account statement, and the bitter truth presented itself in all its merciless clarity. Over the past 6 months exactly, when he had started growing cold towards me, a series of withdrawals and transfers had been made. Large sums, $50,000 here, $100,000 there, were regularly transferred to an account whose recipient was none other than Megan. Furthermore, there were huge payments to a luxury car dealership and several well-known jewelry stores. I remembered the new SUV Megan had been bragging about, claiming it was a gift from Michael. I remembered the diamond necklace she wore to a family dinner, saying it was a birthday present from her husband. It was all a lie. Michael, with his engineer's salary, could never have afforded such extravagant gifts for his wife. The one showering her with money, indulging the promiscuous sister-in-law was my husband, David. He had used my savings, my blood, sweat, and tears, to keep his mistress, to buy pleasure for his own brother's wife. This betrayal was more painful and humiliating than the physical infidelity. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had coldly robbed me of my future, making a complete fool of me. My mind was no longer just an icy river. It had become a glacier, cold and sharp. All the love, all the hope, all the last threads that connected me to this man were severed. I didn't cry anymore. Tears were an unaffordable luxury. All I felt was a deep-seated hatred and a burning desire for revenge, stronger than ever. I calmly took pictures of every page of the bank statement, every amount, every date, every recipient's name. I saved them all to the same damned flash drive, right next to their sordid video. Now I had two weapons of mass destruction. One proved their moral decay, the other their financial rot. But I didn't stop there. I kept searching. I found a file named Investment Plan. Inside, there were no stock quotes, but a detailed plan drafted by David. He was going to use the remaining money and take out a mortgage on this very house to open a high-end fashion boutique for Megan. And the manager, of course, would be her. He was building a bright future for them, a future built on my plest, suffering in Michael's. I closed the laptop. A pale smile touched my lips. Thank you, David. Thank you. For showing me your true colors. You're not just a cheater. You're a thief. A thief who stole joint property. A thief who deceived both his wife and his own brother. I stood up and left the office. Before leaving, I made sure to erase all traces of my visit. I made some thin broth, poured it into a thermos, and calmly drove. Back to the hospital, I knew a new performance awaited my return. A family council steeped in hypocrisy, where the criminals would play the victims, and I, the real victim, would have to continue playing the part of the obedient lamb. Fine, I would play. I would play until the very end, until the moment I could bring this entire rotten stage crashing down. When I returned to the hospital with the thermos, David had already been discharged. The doctor said his life was no longer in danger. He just needed to rest at home, under observation. Patricia had probably used her old connections to get her precious son out of that scandalous place as quickly as possible. The house greeted me with an oppressive silence. Patricia sat on the sofa, her face still pale, but her gaze held its former imperiousness. David sat beside her, head bowed, not daring to look at anyone. Megan, having changed into more modest clothes, sat in a far corner, occasionally wiping away tears. Michael sat opposite them, his face hard and cold. He had spent the entire time with his mother at the hospital, and I knew her explanations had not convinced him. Seeing me, Patricia cleared her throat, breaking the silence. Veronica, you're back. Put the thermos down and have a seat. We need to talk. Her voice was calm, as if nothing terrible had happened. I obediently did as she said, sitting down next to Michael, across from my husband and his lover. The family council of lies and hypocrisy had officially begun. Patricia began her speech. I know that what happened last night was a great shock to all of us, but as they say, you don't air your dirty laundry in public. Family matters should not become the subject of gossip. This is about the honor of our entire family, the Hamilton name. She paused, her eyes sweeping over everyone, especially Michael, who was reacting the most strongly. I've already spoken with David and Megan. It was all an accident, an unfortunate misunderstanding. Yesterday, your brother was overworked and exhausted. On top of that, his old sleepwalking problem flared up. That's why he mistakenly went into Megan's room. In his sleep, he felt thirsty. He saw a glass of water on the nightstand that Megan had prepared for herself. He thought it was water and drank it. But it turned out Megan had added a sleeping pill to it to help her sleep better. The two medications had a bad reaction. That's what happened to David. I almost burst out laughing. A new script, more plausible and scientific than the rat poison story. She was a skilled improviser, but she didn't know that the more detailed the script, the more holes it has. As for their clothes, she continued, it's because when David started having convulsions, he was thrashing around, and Megan, in a panic, tried to hold him down. They were struggling, and their clothes got disheveled. That's all. Absolutely nothing of what you might be thinking. Finished, she gave a rehearsed signal to David and Megan. David raised his head and looked at Michael with a guilty expression. Michael, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. I was careless and caused this whole misunderstanding, dragging you and Megan into it. I swear to you, there is nothing between me and Megan. Megan then began her part of the performance. She fell to her knees before Michael, tears streaming down her face. Michael, I beg you, believe me. There. I was really nothing between David and me. I'm a victim too. I swear, if I ever did anything to wrong you, may God strike me down. She sobbed and swore so, tragically, that any man who didn't know better might have softened. But Michael was no fool. He looked at his kneeling wife, then at his brother with his head bowed. He was silent for a long time, then spoke in a cold, sharp voice. A sleeping pill? Since when do you have insomnia so bad you need sleeping? Pills? I've never seen you take one. Megan faltered. It just started a few days ago. I didn't want to worry you, so I didn't say anything. Is that so? Michael sneered. And what about the doctor's report? The doctor said David was poisoned by a veterinary drug, not a sleeping pill. How do you explain that, Mom? Megan? Patricia immediately interjected. The hospital must have made a mistake with the tests. I'll deal with them. Don't believe those stupid papers. A mistake? Michael snarled. Mom, do you take me for a 3-year-old? A major hospital making a mistake on something so serious? The atmosphere grew tense again. Patricia, seeing that logic wouldn't convince Michael, resorted to emotional pressure. Michael, I know you're angry, but he is your brother. Are you really going to destroy him? If this gets out, he'll lose his career, his reputation, and our family won't be able to show our faces in public. I'm asking you, for the sake of our family, to forget about this. I forbid it. From this moment on, no one is to mention this again. Consider it as if it never happened. That is my order. She played her final card, maternal authority. I sat silently, not saying a word, just watching. I saw the turmoil in Michael's eyes. He was angry, he was suspicious, but he was also bound by a sense of duty, by so-called brotherhood. He was being torn apart. I knew it was my time to intervene, not to expose, but to seemingly douse the flames. I stood up, walked over to Michael, and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. I think Mom is right, Michael. It's better to have a fragile peace than a good pursuit. War. David has already realized his mistake. I think we should give him a chance. After all, you're brothers. My words stunned everyone. They probably never expected that I, the betrayed party, could utter such magnanimous words. Michael gave me a complex look. Patricia, David, and Megan looked at me with surprise, which gradually turned into smug relief. They thought I had given up, that because of my weakness and love for my husband, I had chosen to endure. I struggled to suppress a smirk. How wrong you are. I'm not being magnanimous. I'm just giving you a little more time to enjoy this false peace. The higher you climb, the harder you'll fall. The more you believe you're safe, the more unexpected and deadly the final blow will be. I needed a bigger stage, with a larger audience, to bring down the final curtain on this play. And that stage was fast approaching. Mother's 60th birthday. The day when all the relatives and friends would gather. That would be my judgment day. For a week after that hypocritical family council, a strange, artificial calm settled over the house. Everyone tried to act as if nothing had happened. Patricia stopped picking on me. Megan avoided me like a mouse from a cat. David, on the other hand, displayed extreme remorse and attentiveness. He bought me flowers and gifts, whispered sweet nothings, trying to atone for his guilt. He thought I had truly forgiven him, that I was the same little fool who was easy to manipulate. I accepted all this fake affection with a gentle smile, but inside I felt only disgust. Michael remained sullen and silent. He stopped asking questions, but I knew the fire of suspicion in his heart had not been extinguished. It was merely suppressed, waiting for a spark to ignite it, burn everything to the ground, and I was going to be that spark. Patricia's 60th birthday was approaching. It was a huge event for the Hamilton family, always celebrated in grand style at their lake house. Every year, all the relatives and close friends gathered. It was an occasion for Patricia to show off her status, to boast about her 2 successful sons and her 2 virtuous daughters-in-law. This year was no exception. Patricia tasked me and Megan with preparing everything perfectly, from the catering to the decorations. She gave me a special instruction. Veronica, this year, I want you to prepare a little slideshow with memorable photos from my life. When everyone is gathered, you can play it, so we can all reminisce about the good times. She had no idea that her request had just handed me the perfect opportunity, the ideal stage for the finale of my play. I eagerly agreed. Of course, Mom, don't worry. I'll make it perfect. I spent the entire day on my computer, but I wasn't looking for old photos. I was editing my precious video footage. I skillfully intercut the video of their lovemaking with the bank statements. I added clear captions. A gift from brother-in-law David to sister-in-law Megan, in memory of their secret getaways. The video ended with an image of the King Power blister pack next to the veterinary tablet with the caption, "And this is the price of betrayal." I had created a masterpiece of vengeance, a time bomb waiting for its moment. On the day of the party, the lake house was packed with guests, uncles, aunts, cousins, everyone was there, laughing and chatting, completely unaware they were about to witness a drama more intense than any TV show. The banquet was in full swing. After the first toasts and congratulations, everyone started eating and drinking. This was it, my moment. I stood up, took the microphone, and said in a clear, slightly emotional voice, "Dear guests, beloved family, today is a very special day for our mom. On behalf of the whole family, I'd like to share a little slideshow so we can all remember some of the brightest and warmest moments of her life." Everyone applauded. Patricia, sitting at the head of the table, beamed at me with a satisfied smile. David and Megan were also sitting there, suspecting nothing. They thought I was just playing the part of the dutiful daughter-in-law. I inserted my flash drive into the large-screen TV set up in the center of the great room. I calmly pressed play. The screen lit up. But instead of photos of the birthday girl, it showed the image of David and Megan, entwined in each other's arms on that all-too-familiar sofa. A deafening silence instantly fell over the noisy room. Everyone froze, their eyes wide in disbelief. You could hear a fork drop to the floor. Patricia's mouth fell open, her face turning a deathly pale. What is this? Turn it off! Turn it off this instant," she stammered. David was jolted as if by an electric shock. He jumped up and lunged for the TV to pull the plug, but it was too late. The video continued. Filthy caresses, shameless kisses, the vulgar moans echoed through the festive room. All the relatives were dumbfounded. Whispers erupted. "Oh my God, that's David and Megan! I can't believe it, their brother and sister-in-law! That's practically incest! What a disgrace!" After the steamy scene, the bank statements appeared on the screen. Huge. Numbers, expensive gifts, all clearly listed. The guests were hit with a second wave of shock. They weren't just cheating, they were stealing money, deceiving both a wife and a brother. The bomb had detonated. The Hamilton family was plunged into chaos. Patricia was speechless, unable to utter a word, just trembling all over. David and Megan had no color left in their faces. They stood frozen in the middle of the room, absorbing hundreds of contemptuous and disgusted stares. I stood in the corner, silently observing the fruits of my labor. I felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a strange emptiness. But I knew I had done the right thing. This rot had to be exposed. And then, the second lightning bolt struck. A real one. Michael, who had been sitting silently until now, his eyes bloodshot and his fists clenched white, suddenly shot up. He didn't say a word. He just slowly walked over to his older brother. And then came the devastating blow that began a fratricidal brawl in the middle of the party. Michael's punch landed squarely on David's face with a sickening crack that made everyone flinch. David staggered and fell backward, crashing right onto the banquet table. The table overturned, sending plates and food flying everywhere. The festive atmosphere had turned into a battlefield. David clutched his face, blood pouring from his nose, but Michael gave him no time to recover. He lunged at him like a wounded tiger, grabbed him by the collar and roared, "You, bastard! You call yourself my brother. You dared to sleep with my wife in my own house? I'm going to kill you." Michael hit David with his fists, his feet, his knees. This was no longer the kind, simple engineer. The betrayal by the two closest people in his life had turned him into a wild beast. All the pent-up pain, all the suspicions of the crude past week erupted in a destructive fury. David, being weaker, could only cover his head with his hands and whimper, "Michael, I'm sorry, it was my fault. It was Megan. She seduced me." In his panic, he shamelessly threw all the blame onto his lover. Hearing her name, Megan, who had been kneeling in a corner, flinched. She crawled towards Michael, grabbed his legs and sobbed, "Michael, forgive me. David forced me. I didn't want to. Please forgive me." This time she was playing the tragic victim, trying to absolve herself of responsibility, to evoke a shred of pity. But Michael no longer believed anyone. He kicked her away, his eyes filled with disgust. "Shut up, you filthy woman. You're no better than he is." The brothers' fight grew more violent. The relatives, recovering from their plays, shock, rushed to separate them. The men tried to pull Michael off. The women helped David up. Shouts, curses, cries, it all blended into a chaotic, shameful symphony. The Hamilton house, once a source of pride, had become a public spectacle. Patricia sat in her chair like a statue. She didn't cry or scream, she just sat, there with a vacant stare, watching her sons fight, watching the banquet table get destroyed. The family values, the honor she was so proud of, were now being trampled by her own children, whom she had so admired. The mask of morality, the facade of a happy family she loved to preach about, had been ruthlessly torn off by me, the daughter-in-law she despised most, in front of all her relatives. She couldn't utter a single word to defend her beloved son. Any words were now meaningless. In the chaos, no one paid any attention to me. I stood quietly in the corner, watching calmly. I was the director of this play, and everything was going exactly as I had planned. This physical punishment was for Michael, so he could release some of his pain. But for me, it wasn't enough. I needed a deeper punishment. One more disgusting truth had to be revealed to finally sever all ties, all the last vestiges of feeling I had for this family. And it seemed heaven itself was on my side. In her panic, pinned against the wall by Megan, in a desperate attempt to save herself and find an excuse, screamed a sentence that accidentally revealed an even more shocking truth. A truth that pushed Patricia into the abyss of despair. "It's not just my fault. Mom knew too. She's known for a long time." Megan's words were a second bomb, exploding at the epicenter of the hurricane. The room fell silent again. All eyes shocked, contemptuous now turned to Patricia, sitting motionless in her chair. Even Michael stopped and turned to his mother, his face a canvas of disbelief. The matriarch's complicity in the crime was about to be exposed by the very pawn she had been protecting. Everyone in the room held their breath, waiting for Patricia's reaction. The air grew thick and tense. Shaken from her stupor, Patricia began to tremble. She looked at Megan with a gaze that mixed the fury of betrayal with the panic of her darkest secret being exposed. What are you talking about, you tramp?" she shrieked, trying to deny it. But Megan had nothing left to lose. Cornered, she was like a wounded animal, ready to bite anyone, even the one who had protected her. She looked directly at Patricia, her voice full of resentment and bitterness. "I'm talking nonsense? Do you dare say you didn't know? That Louis Vuitton bag I gave you last month, do you know where the money came from? That pearl necklace you're wearing, right? Now do you know who bought it? It was all money David gave me. I told you. David was being very good to me, and you were happy. You said I needed to know how to keep him. Did you or did you not say that?" Every word from Megan was a hammer blow to Patricia. She was speechless, her face turning from pale to red and back again. There was no denying it. The shocking truth was out. Patricia, the mother-in-law who always preached about morality and family values, had known about her son's illicit affair with her younger daughter-in-law all along. But out of greed, because of the expensive gifts Megan had bribed her with using David's money, she had chosen to turn a blind eye. She had condoned the sin, allowing her older daughter-in-law me to be deceived and betrayed in her own home. She had even secretly encouraged the relationship because it brought her material gain. Michael, hearing this, froze. He looked at his mother, then at his wife. His face no longer showed anger, only boundless pain and disillusionment. The mother he had always respected, the wife he had loved both, had deceived him, had conspired to hide a monstrous sin. His faith was utterly shattered. He said nothing, just silently took a few steps back, looking at them as if they were strangers. I stood there, witnessing it all. Now I understood. I understood why Patricia had hated me so much and adored Megan. Because I was just a useless daughter-in-law who knew how to work but brought her no financial benefit. And Megan was a gold mine, a hen that laid golden eggs. It didn't matter that those eggs were born of rot and immorality. In her eyes, a mother's love, the relationship between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, it was all measured in money. Boundless contempt filled my soul. Any feelings, even the smallest ones, that I had tried to preserve for this woman, evaporated in that moment. She didn't deserve to be called a mother. She was just a greedy, selfish, and evil woman. The relatives who had once respected Patricia now looked at her with entirely different eyes. They whispered among themselves, "I can't believe Patricia is like that. She sold her family's honor for money. Now it all makes sense why she was protecting her son and younger daughter-in-law." Exposed in front of all her relatives, Patricia couldn't take it anymore. She clutched her chest, her breathing becoming labored. "Water. I need water," she whispered. But no one moved. Everyone just stood there, looking at her with cold, alienated eyes. Even David, her favorite son, was too consumed by his own shame to pay attention to his mother. I watched this scene without a shred of pity. This was the price she had to pay. You reap what you sow. She had sown greed and lies, and now she reaped contempt and loneliness. The spectacle was over. All the secrets were out. It was time for me to take back what belonged to me. I calmly walked to the center of the room where all attention was focused. I went straight to David, who was sitting pathetically on the floor. I silently took a stack of papers from my purse and threw them in his face. "Sign it," I said in an icy voice. "We're done." It was the divorce petition I had prepared in advance, and it was the starting gun for my swift legal assault. The divorce papers landed in front of David like a death sentence. With a trembling hand, he picked them up, looked at the bold letters "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," and then looked up at me with a frightened, disbelieving gaze. He had probably, until this very moment, clung to the illusion that I, out of love for him, out of fear of public opinion, would choose silence and endurance. He had grossly underestimated the hatred and determination of a woman pushed to the edge. "Veronica, don't," he stammered, trying to crawl over and grab my leg. "I know I was wrong. Please, just give me one more chance. Let's start over." "A chance?" I laughed, a bitter, ironic sound. "Did you give me a chance when you grew cold to me? Did you give me a chance to know why when you were secretly sleeping with your brother's wife? Did you give me a chance at respect when you were spending my hard-earned money to support her? You closed every door, David. Now I'm locking them and throwing away the key." I didn't let him say another word. I turned to the relatives and announced in a clear, firm voice, "Dear family, I'm sorry to have disturbed you on such a day, but some wounds, if not lanced, will destroy the entire body. I, Veronica Hamilton, officially declare today that I am no longer a daughter-in-law of the Tan Hamilton family." With that, I turned and walked away, ignoring David's cries and pleas, Patricia's vacant stare, and the chaos behind me. I knew my war wasn't over. It had just moved from the emotional front to the legal one, and on that front, all my weapons were ready. The very next day, I was at the courthouse with my lawyer. I didn't just file for divorce. I filed a motion for an emergency injunction to freeze all our joint assets held in David's name, including our house, his car, and his bank accounts. I wouldn't give him a chance to hide anything before the proceedings. Then I filed a lawsuit against David, citing infidelity and misappropriation of marital assets. With the irrefutable evidence, I had the video, the detailed bank statements, the business plan for his lover. My lawyer assured me it was a 100% win. I wasn't just demanding a larger share of the assets. I was demanding he compensate me for emotional distress. Receiving the court summons, David was completely crushed. He never expected me to act so decisively and ruthlessly. He called and texted me constantly, sometimes pleading, sometimes threatening. I never responded. To me, he was a stranger. Patricia, learning of this, also tried to save her son. She called me, alternating between a soft and a scathing tone. Veronica, aren't you being too cruel? No matter what, he's your husband, the father of your future children. What will you gain by cornering him like this? I replied calmly into the phone. First, we have no children. Second, he cornered himself long before I did anything. And third, Patricia, you should take care of your health. Stay out of our affairs, or I can't guarantee that the secrets of your complicity won't become public knowledge. Hearing that, Patricia fell silent. The court case was swift. Faced with undeniable proof, David couldn't deny anything. He stood before the judge, haggard and pathetic, a stark contrast to the polished sales director he once was. He hung his head and admitted to all his transgressions, hoping only for a lenient judgment. In the end, the court ruled. I was granted the divorce. The house and car were appraised, and I was awarded 2/3 of their value, as the fault lay entirely with David. He was forced to sell the house to pay me my share. The nearly $500,000 he had secretly withdrawn, he was ordered to repay to me in full. On top of that was a significant sum for emotional damages. After the trial, David was left with nothing. He had lost not only his wife, his family, and his reputation, but he was also saddled with massive debt. He knelt on the steps of the courthouse, crying and clinging to the hem of my coat. But I just coldly pushed his hand away and walked on. The door of hope for him was closed forever. Reaching this point, I truly felt a sense of satisfaction, but also a bitterness. Revenge, however sweet, cannot erase the scars of betrayal. It was a painful path to justice, but also a path to healing, to reclaiming my own self-worth. This story is not just about infidelity, but about the greed and complicity that can rot a family from the inside out. The value here lies in the power of truth and self-respect. Only by bravely facing the truth and learning to value oneself can a woman pull herself out of the mire of lies and find her own path. After my resounding victory in court, a real storm broke over the remaining members of the Hamilton family. They were like parasites. When the host they fed on died, they too began to perish. The first to be punished was Megan. After that disastrous birthday party, Michael had silently packed his bags and left. He didn't file for divorce immediately, not because he missed her, but because he wanted his wife to experience a fate worse than death. He cut off all contact and froze all their joint bank accounts. Megan, accustomed to a life of luxury and being provided for, was suddenly cut off from her source of income. With no job and no money, she became a freeloader in a crumbling house. When David was forced by the court to sell the house to pay me, Megan went into a full-blown panic. She realized the day she would be thrown out onto the street was near. She tried to contact Michael, crying and begging, but was met with only a frightening silence. Michael gave her time to feel despair, to understand what hell was. And then, on the very day the house was sold, Michael appeared. He didn't come alone. He brought a lawyer. He didn't say a word to Megan, just handed her the 4-BST, already signed divorce papers. In the petition, he demanded that Megan leave with nothing, as her adultery was a gross violation of their marital contract. Megan screamed and clung to him, but Michael just coldly pushed her away. "You deserve nothing from me. Get out of my life." Those were the last words he ever said to his unfaithful wife. Megan was kicked out of the house that night with a single suitcase, tainted by the scandal of sleeping with her brother-in-law. She became the laughingstock of the whole town. She went to her parents, but they, having learned of their daughter's shameful deeds, slammed the door in her face. They couldn't accept a daughter who had disgraced their family. Rejected by her husband's family, disowned by her own, Megan became homeless. With no money, no real education, and only her fading beauty, she began to drift, taking odd jobs to survive. Her future was black, without a single glimmer of light. David's life turned out even worse. The incestuous scandal at the party had been filmed by a relative and posted on social media. Although it was quickly taken down, it was enough to completely destroy his career. The company he worked for, not wanting to be associated with such a notorious employee, fired him. He lost his job. After selling the house and paying all his debts to me, he was left with a pathetic sum. He had to rent a tiny, damp room in a rundown part of town. From a respectable sales director who drove a luxury car and lived in a mansion, he had become an unemployed man hiding from contemptuous glares. His relatives considered him a disgrace to the family. No one offered him a helping hand. He had to take on manual labor jobs to survive. He lived every day with guilt and belated remorse. His life had hit rock bottom, a bottom he had dug for himself. While the main sinners, David and Megan, paid for their actions, the accomplice who had enabled their sin did not escape her fate. Patricia, after the horrific shock of the party and the shameful trial, was completely broken. The immense stress triggered a massive stroke. It left her paralyzed on one side, her face contorted, her speech slurred. From an imperious, sharp-tongued woman, she had become a bedridden invalid, completely dependent on others. When the house was sold, David, destitute himself, had neither the strength nor the money to care for his mother. He had to place her in a cheap nursing home on the outskirts of the city, a place with deplorable conditions. Michael, her other son, had grown completely cold towards her. He considered her one of the main culprits in their family's tragedy. He never visited her once. He told relatives, "My mother is dead to me." Patricia lay on a cold bed in that lonely place, surrounded by strangers. Not a single family member was by her side. The last days of her life were spent in the torment of illness and a guilty conscience. She would remember her glory days, her pride in her family, in her 2 successful sons. But it had all burst like a soap bubble. In her delirium, she would constantly call my name, Veronica. Perhaps only then did she realize that the daughter-in-law she had despised and humiliated was the only one who had ever truly treated her well. She repented, she cried, but it was far too late. The tears of remorse could not wash away her sins, could not save the family that had rotted to its core. The door of hope and forgiveness for her was closed forever. The verdict of her own conscience was perhaps the most agonizing and cruel punishment of all. I heard this news from distant relatives. My heart remained calm. No joy, no pity. I just thought that the law of karma is always just, even if it is delayed. Each of them got the end they deserved, and I, having fulfilled my mission as judge, had to move on with my own life. After finalizing the divorce and receiving my settlement, I felt as if I had been reborn. I was no longer Veronica Hamilton, the submissive and humiliated shadow. I was Veronica, a free, independent woman, capable of deciding her own destiny. I sold the old house, full of painful memories. With that money and my settlement, I bought a spacious condo in a nice downtown neighborhood. I moved my parents in with me. After so many years of worrying about me, they deserved a peaceful and happy retirement. My old accounting job no longer satisfied me. I quit and decided to pursue my dream. Using my financial knowledge and experience, I co-founded a small consulting firm with a few friends, helping small and medium-sized businesses. It was tough at first, but through perseverance and determination, my company gradually found its footing and began to grow. I found joy and passion in my work, something I had lost long ago. I was no longer living for someone else. I was living for myself. I didn't rush into a new relationship. The scar of betrayal was still there. It needed time to heal. But I was no longer afraid of love. I believed that somewhere out there was a good man who would value and truly love me. But before I could find him, I had to learn to love and value myself. Occasionally, news of the Hamilton family would reach me. David was still struggling to survive at the bottom of society. Megan had disappeared. No one knew where she went. And Patricia, they said, had died in the nursing home from a second stroke. All the grudges and hatred had now truly dissipated like smoke. My story may be a tragedy, but it is also a lesson. A hard lesson about betrayal, greed, and the consequences of condoning sin. But more importantly, it's a lesson about the power of a woman's self-respect and will to live. We women can be gentle, we can be self-sacrificing, but we must never let others trample on our dignity. This afternoon, standing on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out at the Reliant Nation, bustling city below, I smiled. I was once a bird in a cage, submissive and helpless. But now, I am a phoenix, having shed the filth of the past to spread my wings and soar into the vast blue sky. The storm has passed, and a bright dawn awaits me,